This is what would actually happen if the US dollar collapsed, and why most economists say it will not, but some are genuinely worried. The dollar serves as the backbone of the global financial system, making up 57.7% of all foreign exchange reserves held by central banks worldwide and appearing in 88% of all foreign exchange transactions. Around the world, roughly $13 trillion in debt is denominated in US dollars, which means a dollar collapse is not just an American problem. Today, we are going to examine the real threats facing the dollar, what history teaches us about currency collapses, and what Americans would actually experience if it happened. As of December 2025, US national debt has reached $38.4 trillion, growing at roughly $6.12 billion every single day. But here is the number that concerns economists most. Interest payments on that debt exceeded $1.1 trillion in fiscal year 2024, the first time those payments crossed that threshold, and they now consume about 18% of all government revenue. Moody's projects that figure will hit 30% by 2035. That brings us to what Moody's did in May 2025, when it became the last major credit rating agency to strip the United States of its top credit rating. Fitch had already downgraded in August 2023, and S&P made the original downgrade back in August 2011. All three agencies pointed to the same problems: persistent deficits, growing debt, and political gridlock preventing reform. Foreign governments have taken notice. China has reduced its treasury holdings from a peak of roughly $1.3 trillion in 2013 down to $759 billion as of December 2024. Central banks around the world have been buying gold aggressively, acquiring over 3,200 tons during 2022 through 2024. A striking milestone arrived in late 2025 when global central banks began holding more gold, approximately $4.5 trillion worth, than they hold in US Treasuries, at about $3.5 trillion. That had not happened in roughly 30 years. Before we go further, something needs to be clear. The dollar's share of global reserves has fallen from 72% in 2001 to 57.7% today, but the drop has been gradual rather than accelerating. The IMF has explicitly stated that statistical tests do not indicate an accelerating decline in the dollar's reserve share. Where the diversification is actually going tells an interesting story. The money is not flowing to the Chinese yuan, which holds just 2.1% of global reserves, actually down from its 2022 peak. Countries are instead moving into smaller stable currencies like the Australian dollar and Korean won, not alternatives capable of replacing the dollar. SWIFT payment data shows dollar usage at 50.2% as of early 2025, up from 41% just 2 years earlier, and roughly 80% of global oil sales remain priced in dollars. You have probably heard about BRICS and their de-dollarization efforts. At the July 2025 Rio Summit, the final declaration made no mention of creating a common currency. Russian President Putin stated in November 2024 that we have not sought to abandon the dollar, and we are not seeking to do so. The aspirations exist, but concrete progress does not. What does an actual currency collapse look like? History offers sobering examples. Germany's hyperinflation from 1921 to 1923 saw the mark collapse from 4.2 per dollar before World War I to 4.2 trillion per dollar by November 1923. At peak inflation, prices doubled every 3.7 days. A cup of coffee costing 5,000 marks would cost 7,000 marks by the time you ordered a second cup. Zimbabwe's hyperinflation from 2007 to 2009 reached even more extreme levels, with prices doubling every 24.7 hours at the peak. Unemployment hit approximately 80%, and 70% of the population needed food assistance. Zimbabwe abandoned its currency entirely in early 2009 and adopted the US dollar instead. Venezuela's bolivar has undergone 3 redenominations since 2008, removing a total of 14 zeros from the currency. The minimum wage collapsed from approximately $360 monthly in 2012 to just $1.65 by early 2025, and an estimated 8 million Venezuelans have left the country. All of these cases share common patterns. Excessive money printing covered fiscal deficits while productive capacity collapsed. What finally triggered each spiral was a loss of public confidence that caused people to rush out and spend their rapidly depreciating currency before it became worthless. A significant dollar collapse would hit Americans immediately through import prices. The United States brings in roughly $3 trillion in goods annually, including 55% of fresh fruit, 32% of fresh vegetables, and 94% of all seafood consumed domestically. Energy costs would spike because commodities like oil are priced globally, creating multiplier effects throughout the economy. Dollar-denominated savings would lose real value as inflation accelerated, hitting those close to retirement hardest. Argentina's 2001 crisis showed what that looks like when the government froze bank accounts, preventing citizens from accessing their own money. Venezuelan citizens watched their savings become virtually worthless. Interest rates would likely spike dramatically. Argentina pushed rates above 60% during its 2018 crisis. Higher rates would increase mortgage payments, credit card costs, and business borrowing, potentially triggering a deep recession. A dollar collapse would not stay contained within American borders. Approximately 66 countries either peg their currency to the dollar or use it as legal tender, including Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, and Ecuador. Emerging markets carry approximately $5.1 trillion in dollar credit. When local currencies fall against the dollar, that debt burden increases in local terms. Companies struggle to service obligations, and capital flees. The 1997 Asian financial crisis showed exactly how this works. Thailand's baht collapsed from 25 to 56 per dollar. Indonesia's rupiah fell from 2,500 to 11,000 per dollar, and IMF bailouts totaled $118 billion. Is a dollar collapse likely? Expert opinion genuinely divides here. Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller stated in February 2024 that he does not expect to see the United States dollar lose its status as the world's reserve currency anytime soon. His reasoning pointed to what happened during crises in 2008 and 2020, when capital moved toward dollar assets rather than away. The Federal Reserve's July 2025 staff report concluded that absent large-scale, lasting disruptions, the dollar will likely remain the world's dominant international currency for the foreseeable future. But Bridgewater founder Ray Dalio has warned of a potential debt death spiral, describing what happens when the debtor needs to borrow money just to pay debt service, and it accelerates. In April 2025, he said the very value of money is at stake. The disagreement is not about whether challenges exist. The question is whether those challenges produce gradual erosion over decades or could trigger a sudden collapse. The transition from the British pound to the dollar took 30 to 70 years. Confidence-driven failures, once they begin, can move very fast. The dollar experienced its worst first-half performance in over 50 years in 2025, dropping 10.7% against major currencies. Gold reached record highs of approximately $3,578 per ounce. All three major credit rating agencies have now downgraded United States debt, and yet no viable replacement exists. The yuan lacks full convertibility, the euro lacks unified fiscal backing, and during past crises, money has consistently fled toward the dollar rather than away. For those concerned, economists generally recommend diversification, not as a prediction of collapse, but as prudent hedging against uncertainty. Dollar dominance is not guaranteed forever, but its replacement will likely be measured in decades rather than days.